Hey, welcome to the 2025 Premium and Creator Reseller Spreadsheet tutorial. I'm guessing if you're watching, you're here to get a few tips on how to fill out this sheet to get the most out of the features. First of all, thank you for your purchase. I appreciate that. My goal with these is to really help you track your business and to make informed decisions so that you can continue to succeed and do things that help your business grow. In case you don't know who I am, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jason. I'm a full-time reseller and I create these spreadsheets for others like yourself. If you found this video and you're looking for a reseller spreadsheet, you'll find mine linked below in the description of this video. Before we dive into the step-by-step of how this sheet works, there are a couple things I need to say right up front. First, a commonly asked question is, where do I find my sheet once I've created the copy and I'm going back in the second time to access it? And it's a great question. All you need to do is log into your Google Drive and it will be right there. No need to save it to your desktop. Just log into Google Drive and you'll find it. Next, if you've purchased the Premium or the Creator spreadsheet, you're in the right place. Since both spreadsheets are pretty much identical, with the Creator having a few more tabs that the Premium doesn't, I'm going to cover the tutorial for both of those here in this video. We're going to get underway here soon. And if you purchase the Creator, I invite you to follow along with me as well. And then at the very end, I'll cover those few tabs that the Creator has that the Premium doesn't. And lastly, with that said, this is going to be a rather lengthy video. I do want to make sure I'm covering all the details and specifics and nuances in order to best help you fill out and get the most out of this sheet. If you are a first-time user, I do suggest that you watch the whole video. But if you're a returning user from a previous year's spreadsheet and you're just wanting to get a few little sections of this tutorial, you can always click below in the description of this video and I'll have the chapters broken out so you can jump ahead to the section that pertains to what you're needing help with. Okay, so I think I've cleared the bases and all that. Let's go ahead and get started now. When you access your sheet for the first time, this will be the first tab that you see, and it's the Start tab. Couple things I'd like to point out here. If you're ever looking for this video again, you can find it linked here on the Start page. And next, I've got another video here for those people who are returning from a previous year's spreadsheet, and they're looking for a very quick tutorial on how to transfer over your inventory into this spreadsheet. Now, as you're filling out this sheet, there's likely going to come up instances where you have questions or you run into scenarios that you need help with. And I want to direct you to a couple of ways in which you can find solutions for those issues. And the first one is on the FAQ tab. It's at the very end of the tabs. If you click there, you'll find at the very top some commonly asked questions with answers for you right there. And as you scroll down on the same tab, you'll find a variety of videos here regarding a handful of topics that may be of interest to you in answering the questions that you have. Now, if for some reason you encounter a situation in which you're needing further help and you're not seeing it answered here, then I invite you to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help you with whatever it is you're seeing. And the way that you'll do that is here in this box below. You've got my email that you can directly message, and this box will show you how to share your sheet with me in case you are running into an issue in which you need me to jump in and fix it for you. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any issues whatsoever. I'm more than happy to help. Okay, enough said about that. Let's go back to the Start tab. At the bottom of the page, you'll see this section right here. Now, if you're on the Creator, it's going to look slightly different. It'll have a few more of these, but follow with me now and I'll show you kind of the gist of how this works. So you'll see platforms, expenses, stores, categories, and brands. These are all things that you can track on your spreadsheet should you choose to. Now, you can choose which of these you want to track and measure, and you'll fill in the information based on which one of these you want to track. If you're a newer reseller, let me suggest that you do as many of these as possible because it will give you the most data in your spreadsheet. And I'll show you later on in the tutorial how these flow into the remaining tabs and how they track your business. But let me just start out with how to fill out first. So yours will all be blank. I've put in a little bit of data in this sheet just to show you how it works and where things go. But we'll start off with platforms. And the number next to platforms 8 tells you that you've got 8 platforms that you can track in this sheet. You're not able to add any more than what I've already given you on the sheet. So keep that in mind. If you're on 10, then you'll have to just pick the first 8 that you want to track. So start off by adding up to 8 platforms in these boxes here, starting off with the most important platform here at the top, working your way down. You'll do the same thing here with expenses. You've got 15 that you can track. These would be the different categories of expenses that you have that you're spending on your business on a monthly basis. Next, you've got stores. This essentially means the places where you're buying your goods from to flip. So Goodwill, Salvation Armies, and you can be as specific as you want here. So if you've got a handful of Goodwills in your area, you may want to break it out, and each one has its own store field here. Next, categories. You've got up to 75 categories that you're selling in. So you can see I've got a few here. I'm a clothing seller, but you can also branch out and do electronics or bags and purses or whatever categories you're selling in that you want to measure for your business, put those in here. And lastly, this is new for this sheet. You've got 75 brands that you can now track as well. And let me say before we move on, you are able to come back and add more of any of these later on should you choose to. There's not a lot of pressure on you getting it right the first time. You can always make changes later. Okay, let's go to the inventory tab. The inventory tab is going to be the place where you store all of the actively listed items in your store. So regardless of which platform you're on, you will list out each item here. And on this sheet, I've given you certain titles that I'll explain now. So you've got your listed date. This is going to be the date that you list that item for sale on your different platforms. Next, you've got the item titles. If you want to use shorthand or abbreviation, whatever works for you that will help you remember what that item is, make it your own. The next column is your units column, and you're always going to put a 1 here. That's going to be important to how this sheet flows. So just put a 1 and you're good to go. The bin column is going to be the place where you store your item. Every reseller has a system that helps them identify what bin or tub or what room it's in. And this is going to be the specific code that you have created for where that item is going to be stored once you've listed it. So maybe letters, maybe numbers, or a combination of both. Moving on is the SKU column. This is new this year. If you have a SKU and you want to put it in here, you can do that. It's up to you whether you want to use this field. The next 3 columns are the store, category, and brand. As we filled out these things here on the Start tab, they now give you options as drop downs here under each of these columns. So you'll see the store options I have when I click a drop down. It's going to populate all those that I entered on the Start tab. And it will do the same for category and brands. You can now choose those to track that data. So as you're listing, you'll simply just select the appropriate store, category, and brand that you want to track. These next 2 columns, I and J, you'll want to leave on here, so don't delete them because it pertains to the formatting when you go to copy and paste a sale in the sales tab. Just know that you'll leave these 2 alone. The cost column is going to be the amount that you paid to get that item. So for example, on this first row, I paid $4.50 to purchase this backpack to sell online. Next, you've got a notes column in case you're wanting to jot down any notes that help you with that particular item. XP stands for cross-posting. Many of you are listing your items not just on one site, but on multiple sites. I use this field to put a 1 or an X in the column next to the item if I've cross-listed it. That way, when I go to cross-list my items, I know where I've left off. I know which items have and have not. These last 3 columns over here will give you some stats on the inventory tab itself. So you've got your total inventory. This is going to add up all the units on this sheet and tell you how many items you have actively listed in your inventory tab. This next column is going to add up the total cost of this column for all the items that you've purchased. And then this last one will be the average of that same column. So what are you averaging on the amount spent per item? So one common scenario that's come up from other resellers pertains to what do you do when you've gone to the thrift store, you've purchased a bunch of stuff, you bring all that home, and you're not going to immediately list it online, but you do want to put it in the spreadsheet while the information is still fresh. You've got the receipt right there in your hand, and you want to jot down how much you spent for all these items and where you got them, and etc. So one thing you can do is say, jot down all this information from item title to cost and leave this listed date blank. And then when you go to actually list those items online, you can come in and put the actual date that you listed that item. And that will tell you which items have been listed and which items haven't. And lastly, before we move on, let's say a couple months down the road, you start going to a new thrift store and you're like, I need to add this into my sheet. You're always going to do that from the Start tab because this is attached to formulas and different pages. Just always go back to the Start tab and you'll be good to go. So if you want to add a store, let's say you want to add Salvation Army, you'll just put it in there. And the next time you go back to the inventory tab, it will be an option in your drop down. So again, always go back to the Start tab for any of that stuff. You're good to go. One other thing that could come up on this page and really quickly how to fix it, you'll notice that your inventory tab starts on row 79. And that's because up here hidden are a bunch of formulas for the drop downs. So when I open those rows up, you see a big do not delete right here. And that's telling you if you delete this, you're deleting a good chunk of the inventory tab formulas. If you ever see this, you'll notice you can't scroll up or down. It won't let you. And I've got a box over here explaining exactly how to do that just in case this happens. You'll come in, highlight a bunch of rows starting with 2 all the way down, and then you'll right click and click hide row. And then you'll do this for every single do not delete row. Highlight them, right click, hide. And then you'll do that until you get back to this title row again. And you'll notice you can now scroll down. Okay, so now that we've explained all that, what happens when you make a sale? Good news, you made a sale today, and let's pretend it was this Callaway golf bag. So I've made this really simple. You can copy and paste into the sales tab without having to type in a bunch of information. So you're gonna start with column A, listed date of that row. You're gonna go all the way across through cost, and you're gonna copy it. You're gonna go to the sales tab, and you're gonna go to the first available line. For you, it's gonna be row 13. For me, it's gonna be 27. You'll click into listed date and then paste. And it pastes in really nicely and puts all this information in the appropriate column. And the reason why I say don't delete those 2 green rows on the inventory tab is because it keeps the formatting for this transfer over to the sales tab. Okay, so we've pasted that stuff in. Now we just need to fill in the rest of this information. You're always gonna put the year and the month, and this is pertinent to the rest of the sheet flowing correctly. So let's pretend this is July 1st. This next column is days to sell, and it will tell you how many days it took to sell the item, how many days to flip it. So you don't need to do anything with this. It automatically calculates based on the formula. You'll just leave it blank, and you'll notice later on it will populate. We'll choose the platform that we sold this on. Let's pretend it was eBay. And this is pulling, again, from the Start tab, from all the things that you put in here. So if you want to add a platform, go back to the Start tab and add it there. And then we said it sold on July 1st of 2025. Now when we scroll over, you'll notice a bunch of columns over here that pertaining to the numbers of that transaction. So these first 2 columns are going to be the money that you collected on that transaction. So sale price plus the shipping if you charge shipping. If you do free shipping, you won't put anything in here. And then these next 5 columns are going to be the money that's leaving your business via platform fees, promoted fees, shipping labels, and cost to acquire that item. So all the fees that were required to make that sale. So for sale price, let's just pretend I sold this bag for $75 and I charged $45 shipping. I'm gonna put those here. Now let's scroll back over. When I put the sale price in this transaction, it populated the days to sell, 81. It took 81 days from April 11th to July 1st to make the sale. If for any reason you accidentally type over this column in any of these cells, you'll notice that the data goes away. The formula is still there, but it's preventing it from working. So you can always hit the back button. The back button's your friend if you make a mistake and you want to undo the last change. So you can do that, and that will fix it. Or you can click into the cell that you typed into, hit delete, and it will restore that formula. So that's a quick fix on getting that issue resolved. Okay, so moving on to the fees portion of this transaction. We've got our cost in here that pasted over from the inventory tab, so that's good to go. Next, when we go to ship the item, we'll have a shipping cost that we paid. So whenever you ship it, whatever you pay, that's what you're gonna enter into this cell. So let's just say it was $42.50 to ship. I'm gonna put that in there. And then we're gonna go to the platform that we sold on and put our specific fees related with each transaction. So I sold it on eBay for $75 and they charged me $9.70 in selling fees. That's gonna be your platform fee. Your promoted fee is gonna be for those sites that have a promoted listing option. And of course on eBay, that is an option, but let's just pretend that it didn't sell promoted for this one. Next column is a transaction fee, and I typically leave this blank, but for those sellers who sell on certain platforms that have this transaction fee, if they're wanting to break it out into this column, they can. And usually it's a fixed amount. It's like 1% plus 30 cents per transaction or something like that. The next column here, the sales tax collected column, is really only for those resellers who are actually collecting sales tax on their transactions. So if you're selling on sites like eBay, Poshmark, Mercari, Facebook, etc., you really aren't going to do anything with this column. With each of those sites, the site collects the sales tax from the buyer, And then the site turns around and pays it to the appropriate local and state municipalities. So you don't collect it, you don't pay it, therefore you're not going to enter it in this column here. These next two columns, you'll see auto at the top. Total fees and profit or loss, these are auto calculated. So you really don't have to do anything with these for these to work. Your total fees will be a summation of all of your fees listed here. And then your profit, as you may have guessed, will take the total money that you collected from the business and subtract out the fees that you paid to sell that item to give you your profit or loss. So for the golf bag down here, we sold it for $75 plus $45 shipping. Here are all the fees associated, total fees of $62.20 and a profit of $57.80. Okay, so that one is done, super easy. Now you may be asking, well, what about a Poshmark sale where the shipping is provided by the platform? Or what about all these different scenarios that could come up because you sell on Mercari, or you're using a shipping label, or you're using your own shipping, or you're doing free shipping? I've got a video actually in the FAQ tab that will go over several different types of transactions that you could have depending on where you're selling and how you're selling. And you'll find it right here, record different types of sales transactions. That's the first option for you. And the next one here is record multi-quantity transactions or bundles. So those two videos will touch on a lot of different types of scenarios that could come up, and you can watch those if you're interested. Okay, now going back to the sales tab, what happens when you get a return? Returns happen, it's a part of business, and it's super easy to do it on this sheet. So we're in the month of July, but let's just assume that this men's North Face trucker hat that sold in June got sent out to the buyer, and then they requested to return it, and now you've received it back and you need to issue the refund. So you're gonna go on whatever site it is to do the return, and then after you do that, you're gonna come back to this sheet and fill out 4 pieces of information to make this return in the spreadsheet. So when you do a refund, you only really need 4 pieces of information for this spreadsheet. The year, the month that you're giving the refund. Remember, it's July. Even though this sold in June, it's now July. So we're going to do that. You're going to put the title here. And if you want, you can always copy that same title and then put in refund, or however you want to denote that it's a refund. And then you're going to scroll all the way over to this last column, refund, and you're going to put the actual amount as a negative number for the refund that you're given. Now just keep in mind, on sites like eBay, when you give a refund, eBay gives you your fees back as a credit. So on this hat right here that we sold for $19 plus $4.85 shipping, I'm not going to refund the original shipping. I'm only going to refund the sale price. And when I do that, eBay will say, we're giving the buyer 19, we're giving you a portion of your fees back. Here's the amount we're taking from you. And that's the amount you want to put in the refund column. So let's just say it was $17.50. We're going to do it as a negative number and put it there. Obviously, there are different ways to do refunds. Sometimes you will refund the original shipping, sometimes you won't. But whatever that bottom dollar amount is that you refunded, that's the amount you'll put in there. Okay, with refund, the only other thing we need to do is we're likely going to relist that back onto the sites. So we need to put that back in our inventory. So I'm just going to come in here and copy from listed date through the cost again of that particular item. I'm going to go back to my inventory tab. I'm going to find the next available line, paste it in, and then I'm going to change the date to the actual date that I relisted it. Lastly, we'll delete out the sales from INJ because we don't want that pasting over next time. And now we're good to go. If you want to include a note over here, I do that sometimes just to show that this was an item I got returned. So that's how you record a refund on your spreadsheet. Before we do move on though, I did just think of one thing I want to point out. Different than last year, all of these columns are now sortable on the sales tab. So if for any reason you're entering in sales out of order, or you just want to sort based on alphabetized item title or what have you, you can do that and it won't mess up your sheet. So you'll click on the column that you want to sort, click the arrow or right click, and then sort sheet Z to A or the other way around, and it will sort based on that column. If for some reason you need to get your items back in order according to sold date, you can just click that column, A to Z, and it will sort from the first sale to the last. Okay, now that we've done all of that, this is the real exciting part, and I'm guessing the reason why you purchased this sheet, to get the data that's associated with these sales. So let's go next to the date tab. As you may have guessed, this is going to be the place where it shows how much money you've made on a particular day. And you'll notice a few transactions in here on different days based on sales that I've already logged in the sheet. But if we look to July 1st, there's the sale of the Callaway golf bag that we just recorded. So the 75 plus 45 shipping gives us $120 on this particular day. And as you continue to add sales, it will continue to increase. At the bottom, you've got your monthly totals for how much you've made in sales plus shipping for the month in view, which is a great segue to the next tab, the month tab. It's going to show your metrics on any given month of the year. And this can look intimidating with all of these different columns here. I'm going to quickly go through now and just explain really quickly what each of these mean. So let's take July, for example, because we just recorded that sale. These first 5 columns are going to be related to sales. You've got your total sales of 120. You've got your sales per day. It's going to tell you exactly what it sounds like. How much are you making on a given day in sales for this month? So this amount divided by the number of days in the month gives you this number here. Next, units sold. We've only recorded the 1 sale in July, so that's shown up there. Units sold per day is going to divide by the number of days in the month. All of my numbers here are really low because I haven't logged a lot of transactions, but as I do and as you do as well, you'll start to notice these numbers go up. And then your ASP, your average sales price. We've only got the 1 transaction, so that's our sales price for the month so far. And then at the bottom of each of these columns, you've got the totals and the averages that correspond with each of those columns. These next 5 columns here pertain to profit. On the sales tab, you've got this column here, which is the profit of the item, income minus expenses, and it will total up that profit for the month here in this column. Just like we had over here, you've got profit per day. So this will give you an idea, how much profit are you making per day in that month? Profit per unit, how much profit per item sold? Your margin is just a fancy way of saying what's that percent of profit to sales. So it's going to take the total profit for the month and divide by the total sales to give you your percent. So in July for that 1 transaction, we're averaging a 48% margin. Another fancy sounding metric here is ROI, return on investment. And this is the relation of profit to the cost to acquire that item. So how much profit did you make based on how much money you spent at the thrift store? If you remember going back to the cost of goods section, we paid $10 for this bag, and that $10 resulted in $57.80. So margin is going to be a fancy way to say for every dollar spent, how much do you get in profit? In this case, for this month, for every dollar spent, we make $5.78 profit. Okay, moving on, total refunds. You'll see the refund that we calculated in the sales tab for July. And if for some reason you notice yours being a positive number here, that's because you made it a positive number in the sales tab over here, and you just need to change it to a negative to get it to flow correctly. Sales tax collected, again, most of you won't have anything here because you'll have 0 sales tax, but for those that do collect, that will populate there. You can kind of get an idea for these next 4 columns. They're pretty self-explanatory, but basically you can track your shipping cost, how much you're spending per month on labels, and what your averages are. Next, you've got how much you're spending for items that you've sold. So out of all the items you've sold, now mind you, it's not the items that have not sold, it's just the items that have sold. How much did you pay to acquire those goods? And what's your average for those? Now let me go over these last 5 columns. So let's take average days to sell. It's going to tell you, based on the units you've sold in that month, what your average turn time is. And at the bottom, it will tell you your average for the year. In this example, for the year so far, we're averaging 38 days to sell our items. The great thing about this sheet that's different than last year's is this column is now auto-calculating. So you don't need to manually enter this information in. As you list items on the inventory tab, this number will auto-calculate to show you how many items you've actually listed. Now you may be thinking, well, what happens when you delete items that sell out of inventory? This formula was designed to also capture the sales tab as well for those items that you did remove out of inventory and put in sales. So this number will stay accurate regardless of whether you take it out and put it in the sales tab. Sell-through rate you may be familiar with, but it's basically a way of measuring what percent of your inventory is selling each month. So let's jump ahead to this next column, and you'll notice it's manual entry. This is the only field on this tab that you have to actually fill out if you want to track this data. So I set a reminder on my phone at the first of each month to go in and look at the total inventory that I have actively listed. Now, if your inventory tab is up to date, you can quickly come in here and just pull this number and put it into the month tab. right here. Or you can go to your online sites and look, like eBay will tell you how many active items you have listed, however you want to do it. Just put that number in at the beginning of the month and then your sell-through rate will populate. So for example, here in January, we started off January 1st with 10 units in our inventory listed online. Of those 10, 2 sold. You take the 2 divided by 10 and we sold 20% of our items to give us a 20% sell-through rate. So that's sell-through rate. And then the last column, growth or decline, it's going to take the units that you listed that month, which in January is 4, and it's going to subtract the units that went out or sold, 2, and give you your growth or decline, positive or negative. So basically just a quick way to see, is my inventory growing or declining from month to month? And then at the very bottom of this tab, you'll notice some charts down here to give you an explanation visually of what's going on up here. Okay, so we've looked at the daily sales, we looked at the monthly sales. Now let's look at the year tab. This is going to basically pull all of your yearly totals. And a lot of those numbers are right here on the bottom of the month tab. But if you just want one place to see them all right there on top of one another, that's where it is. You've got your averages for the year and you've got your totals for the year. All right, now let's move on to the expense tab. We don't like having expenses, but it's a part of business. You got to spend money to make money. So this is the place on your sheet where you're going to log every single penny that you spend for the business, with the caveat of you don't have to do that for any shipping labels that you buy, any of your platform fees, your promoted fees, or your transaction fees. You're already logging those into the sales tab, so those are already taken care of. But anything else you will have to track right here. So if we go back to the Start tab, the expenses that we put in here will flow into this column right here. If you want to add any expenses, don't add them here. You'll go back to the Start tab and add them down here, and they'll automatically populate. So we do that, it pops up here. So let me also say you don't want to add or delete any rows between 1 and 20. Anything above 21, just leave alone. If you need to delete data, you can. Instead of deleting the row, just go in and delete the data. These rows have formulas attached, and deleting a row is going to delete a formula. Anything at or below 21, you can add or delete. That's totally fine. Okay, so at the end of each month, I go in and pull my credit card statements, I pull my bank statements, anywhere I'm spending money that's tracking it, and I open them all up and then start to go line by line, entering in my expenses for the month. It's up to you whether you want to do it monthly or as you are purchasing, or however you want to keep track of that, or wait until the end of the year, though I don't suggest it, but do it as best for you. So you'll log the month that you had the expense, the day, the category that the expense falls under, the amount, and any notes of where you bought it or what you bought. I've got a few in here, and you can see right away that as you start to log these expenses, that this chart gets filled out automatically over here. It will tell you the month that you purchased those items and where you spent your money. Now you may be wondering, cost of goods. Why do you have a cost of goods section in here if you have a column on the inventory tab that's tracking your cost of goods that also spills into the sales tab? And I'll try and make this really simple to understand, but really simply, the cost of goods section on your sales tab is really there for you to see how much profit you're making per item. That column doesn't go anywhere else. So unlike these columns that flow into the rest of the sheet, this column dead ends right here. Many of you, especially newer resellers, will want to know how much profit am I making per item, and you need to know how much you spent on that item in order to associate your profit with that. And it's a great educational tool, but on this sheet, it's just educational. So though you can track your cost of goods individually here, you'll want to track the whole amount that you spend at each store on this sheet here. And that's really important. So I highly suggest that each of you create a cost of goods category under your expense column here so that you can start tracking those here. And basically you'll just log every single store that you visit, or if it's a yard sale or a flea market, what have you, and you'll record the full amount you spent plus any sales tax associated. And I'll show you how the rest of this data flows into the profit and loss tab coming up next, but just know that that's very important. Okay, so that's a great segue into the profit and loss statement. For those that aren't familiar with this tab, this is a great snapshot of your business month to month. Now, really quickly, again, not to be confusing, when you think about profit, there's definitely profit you're making on items that you sell. I bought this shirt for $5, I sold it for $20, I had some fees, and let's say I made $12 profit. But we all know that to operate a business, you are going to have expenses outside of selling fees, shipping, and cost. You also have to buy supplies to ship your items in, tape, boxes. You've got software and tools that you purchase to help with selling along the way. You've got a bunch of different random expenses. So even though this is calculating the profit of that particular item, your business has even more expenses. And we recorded those on the last tab. But really simply, the profit and loss statement is exactly what it sounds like. You've got your top section up here that is going to bring in all of the money that you've recorded in your sheet. So your income for the business, your revenue. It's going to subtract out all the expenses that you've paid for your business. And it's going to give you a net profit month to month for your business with a yearly net profit right over here. The great thing about this sheet is the majority of it is auto-calculated. You don't have to do anything. The numbers spit into here automatically. So when you log your sale price and shipping collected here, it's going to populate in this row up here for that corresponding month. When you record refunds in your sales tab, it's going to show up here as well. So it's going to take your total platform revenue, subtract out any refunds you gave to give you for that month your total income, your total revenue. Now you do have 3 manual revenue columns here. You will have to manually enter this in, but let's say you've got some income that you want to calculate into the sheet that is not platform revenue. You can quickly change this and you'll just type in whatever that income is and then manually put in the month that you received it in. So let's say someone paid me $50. It's income I need to capture on the sheet. These 3 rows are all manual. Now let's look at the bottom portion of the sheet. If the top portion was revenue, the bottom portion is expenses. You've got platform fees, your shipping labels, and then this whole chunk right here is going to correspond exactly with your expense chart over here. Those expenses we listed in the expense tab are showing up here on the profit and loss. So really quickly, platform fees is going to pull from these 3 columns here, corresponding with the month that you sold it in. Your shipping labels is going to pull from the sales tab and pull in all your shipping labels that you entered in to tell you how much you've spent on shipping for each month. And then of course your expenses that you logged will pull in as well. And then you've got 3 manual expenses down below. So if you used up all of your 15 categories and now you've got a 16th expense you want to log, you can do that manually here. So each month the profit and loss statement will tell you how much you've made. Now this is a great segue into a big disclaimer here. I'm not a tax accountant, I'm not a tax professional, and I can't offer any advice. If you don't have someone that is helping you with your taxes, I do have on this disclaimer tab over here, someone that I do highly recommend, Carol Ann Olson, and I've given you her contact info here as well. She would love to talk to you. She's a great person to know and really knowledgeable when it comes to taxes. So she can help you see which items you can deduct from your taxes if you're eligible. Reach out to her and she'll give you a free consultation. All right, moving on to the platforms tab. This is, as you guessed, where you're gonna measure how each platform stacks up against one another. You've got up to 8 platforms here. And again, not to be repetitive, but this is really important. If you wanna add a platform, then make sure to go back to the Start tab and add that platform here. And you'll notice it populates over here. So this one's pretty easy to understand. You've got your total sales for that platform for each month, percentage of sales as it relates to the others. So in May, we had 3 sales, 2 on eBay, 1 on Poshmark. eBay represents 70% of our sales for that month. You've got your ASP. What's your average sales price for each month and each platform? And at the very bottom, you've got a fun 3D chart that will break out for the year what platforms are holding what percents of sales. Okay, moving on to store category and brand. This next tab is really exciting because this used to be 2 separate tabs. I added in brands as a way to track as well, and I didn't want to have 3 separate tabs, so I merged them all into one. Now you can quickly see this data here just by clicking this drop down, selecting which of the 3 you want to see, store, category, or brands. You can see how many items you have listed, how many you've sold for those particular, say in this case, brands. your total sales for the brand, your average sales price, profit per unit. I think this is a fun one because you can track how quickly are those items flipping for you. You can sort any of these columns and get the data that you want. So if I want to know what's my fastest moving brand, I can sort. It will show you both Prana and Merrill average 22 days to sell. And remember, you've got up to 75 stores, categories, and brands to track. If you want to add any of those, you'll do it here. You've got up to 75. Unfortunately, you can't go over on this sheet. Moving on to bins, this will be the one place on the sheet where you don't put it on the Start tab, you put it here. Hopefully that's not confusing, but any bins that you have, places where you're storing your items, you'll put those under each of these bin columns. And as you do that and you list items in inventory, it will automatically show you how many items you have in each bin. And this is great for a couple of reasons. I use this to tell me when I go to the garage to get a bin that I'm going to fill up. I want to know which one has the least amount because I want to put the most in it. And I don't have to look through each bin. I can just quickly look at this sheet. Once I get it into the room to start listing, I also do some quality checks to make sure that I'm not missing anything. So if I pull A1 and it says I've got 3 units in there, and if I look in the bin, it's actually got 4, we have a problem. That probably means that one of those items isn't listed in this sheet, and it may not be listed on my platform. So I want to make sure if it's not listed to get it listed. So those are a couple of ways how I use this tab. You've got up to 144 different bins that you can track. Unfortunately, again, you can't add any on this. This next tab, Home Office, is a great tool to make sure that you're getting all the tax credits that you can. When you talk to Carol Ann, she'll be able to fill you in more on this. Many of you will be able to write off the percentage of your home that is your office that you work out of. And this is where I keep track of those bills associated with the home or the business, like cell phone, gas, electric, water, trash, internet. You can put in here any of those that you want to track. You'll just type over these headings. And then each month when I pay my bills, I go in here and update my bill information. I actually just do this at the end of the year because it's really easy to do. But before I give these numbers to my tax accountant, I put them in all right here. It will tell my tax professional how much money I've spent on the year on my home, and they're able to calculate the home office credit based on this information. Another thing that Carol Ann can fill you in on, if you do big projects for your home, you may be able to write off a chunk of that for the business based on the portion of your home that's your business. So if you repaint your whole house, you'll want to jot that down. The day that you paid it, the description of what you did, painted the house, the amount, and who you paid. And then your tax professional can tell you how much you can get as a credit if you can do that. Now with Mileage Tracker, I know many of you are using apps to track your miles, and that's great. But if you want to use this, you can. Simply put the date, beginning and ending odometer. It will calculate the miles that you drove, and then you'll put in any notes. So where you went, and you'll get your total miles driven for the year. You don't have to technically put in these 2 columns in order. You could just come in here and put in 21 if you want. But just know that if you ever get audited, I think the IRS is going to request this information. So I just get in the habit of putting it in. All right, making good time. Next, consignment template. I love this tab. Many of you out there have consignment relationships with people where you sell an item for them or a handful of items, and then you get paid a cut for selling that item. So this is the place where you're going to track those sales. Now, my neighbor has given me a ton of stuff and I've sold it for them, and we've agreed on a certain percent of profit goes to him and goes to me. And I want a place where I can figure out each month, how much do I owe them? So to start, for each person that you have a consignment relationship, you'll want to make a copy of this tab. This is the blank template. So to make a copy, you'll click on the tab, right click, and then click duplicate. When you do that, it will pull up copy of template. I just double click on that and rename it to that person. So I've renamed my neighbor, and then I can click into G1 and retype in their name as well, so I don't get confused as I'm bouncing back and forth between templates. So after we've renamed this appropriately, we're now going to put in their rate. Let's say, for example, my neighbor and I have agreed that I'm going to give him 60%, I'm going to take 40%. I'm going to put in his rate here, and that will calculate the amount they get paid each month. Now, generally, there are 2 ways that you can take a cut. You can take a cut of the sales price, or you can take a percent of the profit. In this example, I'm going to stick with profit because that's the agreement that we have, but whatever you're doing, you'll do that accordingly. The great thing about this consignment template is you don't have to type in all of their sales. You can quickly go to the sales tab, find the transaction that relates to their sale, copy it, and paste it in. So let's just say row 23 is an item I sold for the neighbor. I'm going to click into the year column. I'm going to go all the way across, and I'm going to copy up to transaction fee or up through transaction fee. So I'm going to wait until I've got all of my fees associated with that item in there, and then I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back to their template. I'm going to click in the first available year tab and hit paste. Now, if you ever see these invalid checks here in your spreadsheet, it's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. It's not preventing anything from working. It's just kind of annoying to look at, but that is not an issue. You'll notice that it pasted in the sale details here, and it calculated total fees and profit just like it did on the sales tab. And then we've got 4 columns here. I don't typically look at this, but if you're interested, here's the information. These first 2, as you can see, are your payout. If your agreement is based on sales price, here's your payout, 40% of 35. If your agreement is based on profit, here's your cut. So that would be 40% of 29.13. Here's their payout if it's a percent of sales price, and here's their payout if it's a percent of profit for that particular item. Now, you don't have to look at any of those numbers if you choose not to, because the data is spilling into this chart over here on the far left. And each month, the percent of sales price and profit will populate right here. So again, this is where you'll decide on whether you're taking sales price or profit, and you'll pay out based on that month's numbers there. And then you can mark yes if you've paid them to help you remember that. So in this case, if it's July 1st and I now need to pay out my neighbor for his June sales, and remember, I'm basing my agreement on percentage of profit, I'm going to look at this number here, and then I'll send a check or a Venmo or however I pay him with this amount. That's a great tool to have here in this sheet. All right, well, that pretty much concludes the premium tutorial. So if you purchase the premium, the rest of this information is going to be geared more towards the creator, so you don't have to stick around. But I do want to say thanks so much for your purchase, and I hope you have a great year. For those that have purchased the creator, let's take a look at the additional tabs that you have on yours. So really quickly, the creator has the ability to track multiple types of revenue. Many of you out there don't just resell. You have merchandise that you sell, stickers, shirts, hats, things like that. You have creator money that you receive for creating content, and or you're doing whatnot shows. And this sheet has the ability to capture all of that data. So if we go to the Start tab, you'll notice your merch columns and your creator columns for you to enter in those different types of things you want to track. And then down below, you'll notice a whatnot tab, you'll notice a merch tab, and a creator tab. And then looking at the day tab, this is going to look very similar, except the day tab is now going to pull in all those types of revenue. So rather than just showing your reseller revenue, any particular day is going to show any merchandise sales, any whatnot shows, any reseller data, and any creator income. And similarly, if we're looking at the month tab, it's going to have those 4 revenue streams broken out. So your whatnot data, your online platforms, your merch, and your creator. So a few differences pertaining to the creator from the premium. So let's go to the whatnot tab and see how we're going to enter in this information here. So on the whatnot tab, I've made this to where you can copy and paste inventory in so that you don't have to type all this information out. Again, it's copy and paste, pretty simple. So you'll click the listed date all the way through the cost, you'll copy, and you'll find the next line and paste it in. And that will transfer over that information. So that's one way to bring in inventory. If you've already got it listed in your sheet, that's pretty quick to do. But when it comes to recording your sales, there are a couple ways to do that as well. So let's pretend rows 3 through 7 were a show that we had on March 17th of 2025. Of course, whether you're pasting in this information or typing it out, you're always going to have the year and the month, the sold date that that show happened on. You don't have to worry about listed date. Obviously, that's not going to matter as much. But then you've got this information here. You'll put the sale price for each of those items. So if I sold these North Face pants for $16 on whatnot, I'm going to put that price there. That cost, you can have it there if you want it. Obviously, it's up to you. But if you're pasting in, that will automatically go over. You've got your whatnot fees and your transaction fees. So When you go to ship out that item, it's broken out and you can put that information in here as well. And then these columns will auto-calculate to help tell you your total cost plus fees and your profit or loss on that item for that show. These next 3 columns will give you places to put any giveaway shipping, tips, or referrals that you received during that show. And it doesn't matter what line you put it on, you'll just put it on one of the lines pertaining to that particular show. So that's one way to do it, is to break out your items each individually for those that want to see it like that. But what about those whatnot shows where you've got 50 items and you don't want to do 50 separate lines? This next option, you can do it just like this to save time. So if you want to do more of a macro view of that show, you can come in here, put in the year and month and the day of your show, title it April 1st show, July 1st show, whatever it is, put the units that you sold, your total sales, and then your total cost, fees, and transaction fees for the show. And then you can also total up your shipping tips and referrals and put those on that line as well. And you'll get the macro view of your whatnot show. Of course, any of that information you put in there is going to flow into the month tab and show you specifically how much you're making month to month on your shows with some charts down below. Okay, that's the whatnot tab. Let's go back to the merch tab. This is going to look very similar to the expense tab that you have. So again, on this one, you don't want to delete any rows between 1 and 40 just to protect the formulas in the chart. But as you put in your merch categories here, they'll populate over here up top. And this will give you calculated data based on the sales that you're making in your merch categories. So really quickly, the month that it's in, the day, your merchandise category, units sold, sold price, shipping cost, platform fee, and transaction fee, and any notes that you want. And that will all flow into the month tab as well, all the way over here to show you all the macro view of your numbers. So your sales per day, units sold, etc. And then if we go to the creator tab, this is going to be the place where you record all of the money that you get paid to create content. So again, almost identical to the expense in the merch tab. You put the month, the day, the category, and the amount that you received. The only difference is you won't really have any expenses. It's really just income for creating that content. So you got paid $77 on January 28th from YouTube. You'll put that in here. And as you do that, again, this will populate your total numbers over here on the month tab, which of course you can find on this tab as well. And then you've got pie charts to show you split out where all of your money is coming in from for the year. So when you go to the year tab, I simplified this for creator spreadsheets really because you want to know what are my 4 streams of revenue and what do they look like. So for the year, you've got all the ways in which you're bringing in money and a chart down below to show you what the splits on that. The only other difference will be the profit and loss. Not only will you have your online platform money pulled in, but all your revenue from those 4 streams are automatically calculating into the profit and loss statement. And then similarly, it's also pulling in fees associated with those same platforms. So whatnot, online, and merchandise. So your profit and loss statement will have a few more lines just simply because you have more income and more expenses. Okay, so that concludes this tutorial. If you have any questions, please reach out. I'm here to help in any way that I can. But other than that, I hope this year is great for you. I hope you have a record year and that you're really able to have some fun with this sheet, measuring your business. Thanks so much for purchasing and coming here and watching this video. I hope you have a great one. Bye.